That's what separates those who build something lasting from those who burn out chasing someone else's definition of success. The path forward isn't about doing more, it's about doing what matters. It's about understanding the difference between motion and progress, between activity and purpose. You can be busy without being productive. You can be disciplined without being fulfilled. You can check every box and still feel empty at the end of the day. Because discipline without direction is just motion, and motion without meaning doesn't take you anywhere worth going. So before you commit to another goal, another routine, another change, ask yourself what you're really building. Ask yourself who you're becoming through this process. Ask yourself if this aligns with what actually matters to you. Not what should matter, not what matters to someone else. What matters to you. That clarity is what transforms discipline from obligation into choice, from burden into purpose, from something you have to do into something you want to do because it reflects who you are. And when you have that clarity, everything changes. The work doesn't get easier, but it becomes worth it. The setbacks don't disappear, but they don't break you. The doubt doesn't vanish, but it doesn't stop you. Because you know why you're here, you know what you're building, and you know that the person you're becoming through this process is worth every moment of discomfort, every sacrifice, every early morning, every late night. That's the power of purpose-driven discipline. It's not about perfection, it's about alignment. It's not about never struggling, it's about knowing why the struggle matters. And when you have that, you don't need motivation to keep going. You don't need pressure to stay consistent. You don't need validation to know you're on the right path. You just keep moving forward, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one action at a time, building something that matters, becoming someone you respect, living in a way that aligns with what you value most. That's discipline, that's purpose, that's transformation. Think about the last time you committed to something difficult, a new routine, a long-term goal, a change you wanted to make in your life. At first it felt possible, maybe even exciting. You had reasons, you had energy, you told yourself this time would be different. But somewhere along the way, the excitement faded. The reasons stopped feeling urgent, and the only thing left was the work itself. That's the moment that separates those who continue from those who stop. Not talent, not willpower, but clarity about why it matters. Discipline isn't about forcing yourself to do things you hate. It's about choosing to do things that align with something deeper. And when that alignment exists, the effort doesn't feel like sacrifice. It feels like integrity. Most people never ask themselves what they're building toward. They adopt goals because they sound impressive. They follow routines because someone else said they should. They measure success by standards that were never theirs to begin with. And then they wonder why it feels empty, why the progress doesn't satisfy them, why they can't stay consistent even when they know what to do. The answer is simple. They're working towards something they don't actually want. Or worse, something they think they should want but never chose for themselves. Purpose isn't something you find in a moment of inspiration. It's something you clarify through honest reflection. It's the answer to the question, if no one was watching, if there was no applause, no recognition, no external reward, would I still do this? If the answer is no, you're not building discipline, you're performing, and performance is exhausting. Real discipline is quiet because it doesn't need an audience. It exists in the early mornings when no one sees you, in the decisions you make when no one's asking, in the consistency you maintain when there's no immediate payoff. It's not about proving anything to anyone. It's about becoming someone you respect. And that process doesn't require validation. It requires commitment. When motivation fades, and it will, you're left with two things: the habit you've built and the reason you built it. If the reason is strong enough, the habit survives. If it's not, the habit collapses the moment things get inconvenient. That's why so many people start strong and quit early. They rely on the feeling of motivation to carry them. But feelings are unreliable. They change with your mood, your energy, your circumstances. Purpose doesn't change. It's the constant that holds you steady when everything else is shifting. Think about the people you admire, the ones who've built something meaningful over years, the ones who stayed consistent when others gave up. What separates them isn't talent or luck. It's that they connected their daily actions to something larger than themselves. They didn't wake up every day asking if they felt like doing the work. They woke up knowing the work was part of who they were. And that shift from I have to I am is what makes discipline sustainable. Identity is more powerful than motivation because it's not dependent on how you feel. When discipline becomes part of your identity, it's no longer a choice you debate. It's just what you do. You don't have to convince yourself to brush your teeth. You don't have to motivate yourself to eat when you're hungry. These things are automatic because they're part of your identity as someone who takes care of themselves. The same principle applies to any form of discipline. When you see yourself as someone who shows up, who follows through, who does what they said they would do, you stop needing external motivation. You just act in alignment with who you are. But that identity has to be rooted in something real. It can't be borrowed. It can't be based on what you think you should be. It has to come from a genuine understanding of what matters to you and why. That's where purpose comes in. Purpose gives your identity direction. It tells you what kind of person you're becoming and why that matters. And when you're clear on that, discipline stops being a struggle. It becomes a natural expression of who you are. There will be times when nothing seems to be working, when you're putting in the effort and seeing no results, when progress feels invisible and doubt starts creeping in. This is where most people break. They start questioning whether it's worth it. They compare themselves to others who seem to be moving faster. They wonder if they're wasting their time. And if their discipline was built on motivation or external pressure, this is where it ends. Because motivation doesn't survive discouragement, and external pressure doesn't sustain you when no one's watching. But if your discipline is built on purpose, you keep going. Not because you're blind to the difficulty, but because you understand that the process matters more than the timeline. You're not doing this for quick results. You're doing it because it aligns with who you're becoming. And that's not something you can rush. Purpose reminds you why you started when everything else tells you to stop. It anchors you when doubt creeps in. It gives you a reason to stay consistent even when the results aren't immediate. Because the truth is, most meaningful things take time. They require patience. They require trust in the process, even when you can't see the outcome yet. And the only thing that sustains that kind of patience is a deep understanding of why it matters, not to anyone else, to you. Consistency isn't about perfection. It's not about never missing a day or never making a mistake. It's about returning, about showing up again after you've been knocked down, about continuing even when it would be easier to quit. And purpose is what brings you back. It's the reason you get up after a setback, the reason you try again after a failure, the reason you keep going when no one would blame you for stopping. Most people are driven by comfort or approval. They want to feel good, or they want others to think highly of them. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but neither of those things will sustain you long term. Comfort is temporary. It feels good in the moment, but it doesn't build anything lasting. And the pursuit of comfort often leads to stagnation, because growth requires discomfort. It requires doing things that don't feel easy or pleasant. Approval is conditional. It depends on other people's opinions, which are constantly changing. And when you base your actions on what others think, you give away your power. You become dependent on external validation to feel like you're on the right path. Purpose is different. It's not about how you feel in the moment. It's not about what others think. It's about who you're becoming and what you're building. When you anchor your discipline to something larger than yourself, whether that's a mission, a value, a vision for your future, you stop needing external validation. You stop waiting for permission. You stop looking for proof that it's working. You just keep going, because the work itself is the point. The process is the reward. And the person you're becoming through that process is worth more than any external achievement. That's freedom, not from effort, but from the need for constant reassurance. You become someone who doesn't need to be convinced. You already know. Pressure works for a while. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of wasting time. It can push you forward, but it's exhausting. And eventually, you'll burn out or rebel against it. Because pressure is external. It's something being done to you, not something you're choosing for yourself. And anything that feels forced will eventually create resistance. Purpose is different. It doesn't push, it pulls. It draws you forward because the direction matters, not because you're afraid of falling behind. When discipline is anchored to purpose, it becomes sustainable. You're not forcing yourself. You're choosing yourself. You're choosing the life you want to build, the person you want to become, the impact you want to make. And that choice made over and over is what creates lasting change. Not pressure, not fear, not external expectations, just a clear understanding of what matters and a commitment to living in alignment with that. So ask yourself, why are you doing this? Not what you think you should say, not what sounds impressive, but the real reason, the one that makes the effort worth it even when no one's watching. Because that's the reason that will keep you going when everything else fades. That's the reason that will sustain you through the difficult phases. That's the reason that will turn discipline from a burden into a choice you're willing to make again and again. Discipline without purpose is just endurance. It's gritting your teeth and pushing through. It's surviving, not thriving, and it doesn't last. But discipline with purpose is transformation. It's becoming someone new. It's building a life that reflects your values. It's creating something meaningful that extends beyond yourself. And transformation doesn't happen because you were motivated. It happens because you knew why it mattered, because you connected your daily actions to a larger vision, because you chose to become someone who shows up, who follows through, who does what they said they would do. Not for applause, not for recognition, not because someone told you to, but because it aligns with who you are and who you're becoming. That's the power of purpose. It turns discipline from something you have to do into something you choose to do. And that choice is what makes all the difference. Discipline is easier when it serves something meaningful. When your actions connect to a purpose that matters, the effort feels different. It stops being a burden and becomes a choice you're willing to make again and again. Most people understand discipline as repetition. Show up, do the work, stay consistent, and that's true. But repetition without reason is fragile. It breaks the moment things get hard or boring or inconvenient. The question isn't whether you can be disciplined. The question is, what are you being disciplined for? Many people build habits without understanding why they want the outcome. They wake up early because someone told them successful people do. They work out because they think they should. They grind because everyone else is grinding. But when the alarm goes off and they're tired, when progress stalls, when no one's watching, the habit collapses because it was never theirs to begin with. Discipline built on borrowed goals doesn't last. It's performance, and performance requires an audience. Real discipline is quiet. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't need to be seen. It exists because the person doing it knows exactly why it matters. Motivation fades when goals feel empty or externally driven. You can force yourself to do something for a while. You can rely on willpower, on pressure, on the fear of falling behind. But that only works until it doesn't. Motivation is a spark. It gets you started. But it's not designed to carry you through months or years of repetition. It's not built for the middle, where nothing feels new and progress is invisible. That's where most people quit. Not because they're weak, but because they never connected the action to something deeper. When your goal is just a number, a title, or an image of success you saw somewhere else, it loses power the moment it stops feeling exciting. And it will stop feeling exciting. That's guaranteed. Purpose gives weight to routine and meaning to sacrifice. It's the difference between I have to do this and I choose to do this because it aligns with who I'm becoming. Purpose doesn't make the work easier. It makes the work worth it. When you know why you're doing something, the discomfort becomes part of the process, not a reason to stop. The early mornings, the delayed gratification, the moments when no one else understands what you're building, they all make sense because they're connected to something larger than comfort. Purpose turns discipline into identity, and identity is stronger than motivation will ever be. Disciplined people connect daily effort to long-term identity, not short-term results. They don't wake up asking, "Do I feel like doing this today?" They wake up knowing this is what I do. It's not about the outcome of one workout, one work session, one conversation. It's about becoming the kind of person who shows up regardless of how they feel. That shift changes everything, because once discipline becomes part of who you are, it stops being a decision you have to make every day. It becomes automatic, not because it's easy, but because it's aligned. You're no longer chasing a result. You're living in a way that reflects your values, and that's sustainable. Short-term results will always fluctuate. You'll have good days and bad days, wins and setbacks. But if your discipline is tied to identity, those fluctuations don't shake you. Because you're not doing this for a trophy, you're doing it because it's who you are. Purpose protects consistency during discouraging phases. There will be times when nothing seems to be working, when effort doesn't match outcome, when you're putting in the work and seeing no visible progress. This is where most people break. They start questioning whether it's worth it. They look around and see others succeeding faster, or they compare where they are to where they thought they'd be. And if their discipline was built on motivation or external pressure, this is where it ends. But if it's built on purpose, they keep going. Not because they're blind to the difficulty, but because they understand that the process matters more than the timeline. Purpose reminds you why you started when everything else tells you to stop. It anchors you when doubt creeps in. It gives you a reason to stay consistent, even when no one's watching, even when the results aren't immediate, even when it would be easier to quit. Consistency isn't about perfection, it's about returning, and purpose is what brings you back. This is about identity, becoming someone who works towards something larger than comfort or approval. Most people are driven by comfort or approval. They want to feel good, or they want others to think highly of them, and there's nothing wrong with that, but neither of those things will sustain you long term. Comfort is temporary, approval is conditional. Both will fail you when the work gets hard. Purpose is different. It's not about how you feel in the moment. It's not about what others think. It's about who you're becoming and what you're building. When you anchor your discipline to something larger than yourself, whether that's a mission, a value, a vision for your future, you stop needing external validation. You stop waiting for permission. You stop looking for proof that it's working. You just keep going, because the work itself is the point. That's freedom, not from effort, but from the need for constant reassurance. You become someone who doesn't need to be convinced, you already know. Discipline lasts longest when it is anchored to purpose, not pressure. Pressure works for a while. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of wasting time, it can push you forward, but it's exhausting, and eventually you'll burn out or rebel against it. Purpose is different. It doesn't push, it pulls, it draws you forward because the direction matters, not because you're afraid of falling behind. When discipline is anchored to purpose, it becomes sustainable. You're not forcing yourself. You're choosing yourself. You're choosing the life you want to build, the person you want to become, the impact you want to make. And that choice, made over and over, is what creates lasting change. So ask yourself, why are you doing this? Not what you think you should say, not what sounds impressive, but the real reason, the one that makes the effort worth it even when no one's watching. Because that's the reason that will keep you going when everything else fades. Discipline without purpose is just endurance, but discipline with purpose is transformation. And transformation doesn't happen because you were motivated. It happens because you knew why it mattered.